know. Who are we?
Wow, we're live and we're on time for once. I am very excited about this, guys. We're turning the leaves toward the end of the year. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, but welcome to Bashment Book Club. My name is Paige, and I'm Minimal Bookie. This is the channel you were on, so I would assume you knew me.
Hi, I'm Linnell, weekend reader for the blog. And I need to clarify, do not have a booktube channel. I keep seeing that in the comments.
My name is Sajid. I'm from Books of My Social Life. I didn't finish the book.
I love that you done with that. You're like, I gotta let people know.
In full disclosure and honesty. And then apparently Paige and I did not read the same book. Uh-oh. Did we lose him?
No, I think Sajid's still there.
Ah.
Yeah, me and Linnell was the first person to finish this book. I just finished it about an hour ago, and I would consider that progress because usually it's like up until the last minute that I'm reading these books. But it was like fun. It was relaxing to read this book, so we could start there. Like
it was relaxing.
Let me get my question out. What did you think of the book overall? Like, what are your overall?
Wait, are you going to do the synopsis just in case?
Oh, sure. Let me do the synopsis. I wrote it down on my phone. I am ready. I'm prepared. I'm professional this time. Okay, so the synopsis for this book is: two sisters aged 10 and 16 are exiled from Brooklyn to Bird Hill in Barbados after their mother can no longer care for them. The young Phaedra and her older sister Dion live for the summer of 1989 with their grandmother Hyacinth, a midwife and practitioner of the local spiritual practice of Obeah. Okay, so what were your overall thoughts of what either you've read or read so far?
Wait, Paige, are we live on YouTube?
Mm-hmm.
Saja, do you want to go first?
Oh, sorry, I had some connection issues. So the question was, what do I think of the book overall?
Yeah.
Well, I ain't finished the book, so I can't tell you like my overall thoughts yet. But of the one half that I've read, I'm really enjoying it. I think the story, I understand what you meant by relaxing, Paige, even though the story itself is tough, and we'll get into that a little bit. I think the atmosphere of it is a very relaxing, sort of cool kind of atmosphere, and that's what I really like about it. I like the story. It's very chill, even though a lot of the things that are happening in it are not so chill. And I think that's because of the writing style, which I think the writing style is good, although I did have some issues. I am having some issues with it in the sense that I think it's a little bit clunky, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know, like, I just find like it's not flowing well. But I also feel like the book just does have this kind of, just like any Caribbean book, you know, like when they start to describe the surroundings and the community and the area and the people, there's this almost sort of coziness to it. So that's my thought so far. But in terms of the actual story, it is wow. Like, I mean, I didn't even know what to expect because I was telling Nanella, I thought this was going to be like a fun little coming of age story about these two girls who go back to Barbados. And like, finally, we're reading something that's not traumatic, and then
yeah.
I cried, I think, the last 20 pages. Like, I think that's what I texted you guys. I was like, I'm sobbing. This is too much.
And meanwhile, I didn't cry at all, and I cry at everything. I was just like, I feel like because it was written in third person, there's a removal, and because you see like all these different perspectives, you're not just like in a limited third person, it's third person omniscient, that I sort of felt like removed from the story. I felt like I was just witnessing something happening to characters, and therefore I don't have that emotional like tether. But like for me, it felt sort of like, because it's like set in Barbados and it was like an older time Barbados, I felt like nostalgic. I was like missing being home. I'm missing all these elements of things that they had mentioned. And I was like, oh no, that's why I'm sad. I want to be home.
I was going to ask you too, like, I was curious to hear like your thoughts on like, because is this like the first time you're reading a book set in Barbados, or like, or at least
one that isn't like written in like from like the 1970s, like written old time book. Like this is like a more modern day writer writing from Barbados. My first time reading.
So yeah, I was curious to hear like what were your thoughts like as a Bajan reading this story.
I could tell that the author wasn't born on the islands, like she's from the diaspora, because of certain phrases she would say, like she would call the US the States, where we would just call it overseas, like in general. Like we don't like call it the US really. And like little things like that would take me out of it and be like, oh, you can tell like she's not. But like I feel like she captured a lot of it, especially like, the church element of it, where it's not like super religious, but it's still like the center of the community. Like that's where all the social stuff happens, because I live next door to a church. Like no matter where I was on the island, I was always very close to a church, because like that's just the center. So I really enjoyed like that element of it. I was surprised she didn't write. Like sometimes some of the dialogue would be sort of halfway how you would speak, but it was all like standard English for the most part. And I was like, that's an interesting choice.
I wonder if it was to help non-Caribbean readers be able to understand without like having to walk them through the dialogue too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I noticed, I was waiting for them to use the word wanna, because I know
Yes.
it didn't happen until like 100 pages in, and I was like, oh well, finally somebody said it, and I was like, well, yeah, maybe it's that, and I don't think she wanted to kind of make the same sort of mistake that, remember, I kind of complained about the Janota Petrus book, where it's like, this is not how Trinidadians talk. So maybe she wanted to like avoid that, because I noticed that a lot of Caribbean writers sometimes avoid Creole altogether. Like I read A Silent Life by Ryan Shaw, which is set in Guyana, and I was shocked that there was not a sliver of Creole or patois in the dialogue or the narrative. And I was like, I know these Guyanese people not sitting down here talking like if they is the queen or something. So I think they do it, yeah, to make it more palatable, but also I think writing in Creole could be a little bit tricky sometimes for the author, because there's no like set way or rules to say things and to spell certain things and whatnot. So yeah.
Yeah, the one thing that she did right was like the word kadir. I was like, oh wow, I haven't heard that in so long. That like I was like, oh my god, I miss. So like when I noticed, even when I was talking to my mom today, like my accent came up more because I was reading the book.
Really? Oh my god, that's so cool.
The one thing I thought, I was like, this timeline is so hard to follow, because it's like sometimes doing flashbacks or you're in the current state. But then I was towards the end, I was like, I wonder if she did that because whenever Caribbean people tell stories, it's never like really linear, right? Like it's, you say something and then you remember something else and you fold it in. So I was like, oh, but halfway through, I was like, okay, I can figure out where she's going with
Prepare
this.
yourself. I mean, I know we haven't announced it yet, but our next Bashment Book Club read, prepare yourself for that, because that is the furthest thing from linear. Like, and a lot of Caribbean writers, yeah.
Thanks.
I read the books by that author now, and they're very non-linear, very flashback, jumping back and forth. Nicole Dennis Ben even did it in Here Comes the Sun, right? She was kind of jumping back to the past and stuff a lot. And I think, that's just, maybe it's a Caribbean thing, and maybe it's also like, trying to show that, these people's lives and their problems and the things that they experience didn't have happen in a vacuum. So you have to delve back into that past and that history and say, well, this is how we got to this point.
L. Smith brings up a good point. This is part of like one of the questions I had written about the shifting perspectives, because we do get to see this perspective of every woman in the family. So I was wondering if there was like a perspective that you guys preferred reading about, because we do get Avril, Hesant, Dion, and Phaedra.
I don't know if I would say I liked anyone's perspective better than the other, but I felt like it would have been weird to hear the story if she didn't write it that way, because Dion was definitely angry and you could read that through her perspective, and then Phaedra felt like like anxiety ridden, like what's going on? Do you love me? Are you going to leave me kind of thing? And Hyacinth just felt like a old grandmother that's like, do what I say, even if it don't make sense. But I think if out of all of them, Avril's story felt like there was missing gaps. Like there was that part where her being a nurse and caring for AIDS victims or HIV patients. And, the only thing that we got from that was that it impacted her marriage to Errol, but it didn't, it just felt incomplete, but it should probably be incomplete, right? Because she wasn't there to speak for herself. So
Yeah. I wouldn't say I enjoyed any one perspective more than the other as well. It's interesting because I remember I DNF'd Crazy Rich Asians twice because of this very same reason. Like, I know you love that series. I'm sorry, but like, I couldn't take the whole like the we're in this one's head and then the next sentence we're in this one's head. I think Naomi Jackson does it a little bit better in the sense that I mean, I guess it could be off-putting for some readers, but um, I think I've gotten used to it over the past couple of years or so, reading more books and stuff like that, just getting into the minds of different characters and shifting. And I think she does it in a way that's more natural. I think Kevin Kwan, because the tone of that book is a lot more funny and you're jumping around and whatnot. But this book, it's more like you're fading. So you have a paragraph with Dion, and she's like in the church and she's talking to what's his face, Tyler. What's your boyfriend name?
Trevor.
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 Yeah.
Oh no, it's Chris. It's Chris.
No, Chris is Phaedra.
The small one.
Different.
Yeah, he's a little
Wrong one.
right. Yeah. So like you'd have like a little paragraph, and then they'd casually mention Phaedra, and then you kind of shift over to Phaedra. So like it felt a lot more organic in the way that Jackson was sort of shifting between the characters. But I could also understand why for some people, like for Elle Smith, it might be a little bit fuzzy as well.
You need to, if you're gonna do Crazy Rich Asians, I think you have to do the audiobook. That's the only way you could get through it.
But then I saw
my
the movie,
opinion.
so it's like I know what happened.
The movie was better. I like the movie, how they tied in the second
But
book.
it changed stuff.
Yeah, and it made it better.
Okay.
Like Elle Smith, I preferred Phaedra's perspective. I don't know. I think it's because it was like the more traditional, like somebody returning to the island and then like learning that they actually like living there, like that element of it, because like that was the part that made me the most nostalgic, is like her seeing everything for the first time and the way she described things. Like she was obsessed with the food, and I was like,
yeah,
it's almost kind of funny to me how people romanticize food, because she would mention certain things that I don't like eating, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna just like skip over this. Like you could like it. I don't mind, whatever.
Fine, such as something.
No, it was the jug for Christmas. I was like, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. Everything else was like fine, but
is that like callaloo? Because I was like, I don't know what that is. Is it?
It's like cubed meat. The way she was like, okay. I don't know how to. I'll send you guys pictures after it. Like it's a Christmas thing, but like I am very particular. Like I would have eaten the black cake and that's it. But
oh my gosh,
I'm very specific.
Whatever. People always try to give black cake for Christmas time. I'm like, oh, don't take away my Caribbean card, but I don't want this.
I remember one time I was at like this like beach club for a Christmas dinner, and there was cake, and my parents didn't realize it wasn't chocolate cake, it was black cake, and they gave me a slice, and I was like 7, so I was like grossed out by it. But now I'm like, yeah, give me the alcohol.
They couldn't smell the alcohol fuming from the.
Apparently not. So my mom ate the cake and I ate the icing.
Oh, okay.
I grew up in a Muslim household, so we never even like, But like, there's this kind of cake, I forget what it's called. I don't know if it might even be black cake, because somebody sent it for us, and I tasted it. I'm like, this is gross. This tastes like soggy cake dipped in like poison.
I mean, that's the way to describe it. But
it's like you take the ingredients from, it's like a year of sitting in the alcohol in the rum with the cherries and I can't remember what the other fruit is. So, but I have to be careful because where I'm from, it's black cake and black pudding, and black pudding is
it's blood or something, right?
Yeah, from pig intestines, I think. And young people, I hear one thing. I was like, oh, that's all. No.
Yeah, I know in Guyana they eat that, but I've never really seen it yet. Again, Muslims, so no. So.
What did you guys think of the author's portrayal of like the islands? Because obviously she didn't like grow up there. I'm assuming she grew up in the US because that's what it said in her bio. But her parents were from the Caribbean, and like she gives 2 different perspectives of diaspora through Dion and Phaedra. I felt like they were 2 very opposing views. So like compared to like the other books, we've
well,
read.
well, I think it's because Phaedra's age, like sometimes you don't know that this is not normal. I really think I I felt really bad for Dion because she had to grow up really fast and take on these kind of responsibilities. 16-year-old really should have to. But I think this is the first time I've read like if one kid is in the state or you live in the States and then you come back to the islands, like America isn't this like land of hope and it's just shiny and it really talks about how they struggled and how she would have to lie and cheat and kind of manipulate people to get enough food to eat. So I thought that was an interesting take because I would venture to say a lot more of the migrant story, right? Like moving to another country, trying to start a life in a field that's not always welcoming, is hard and financially and emotionally hard. So.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way that it kind of, I mean, it's a story about mental health too on Avril's part. Even
Mm-hmm.
though we don't get much of a perspective, we get to see like the effects that migration has on somebody in the context of like working class black migrant woman in New York and how that essentially ate away at her, right? Because like the mother always talked about throughout the book, Hyacinth talked about throughout the book, like, when my daughter left, she was a joyful, happy person, and then she became this something else. And I found that to be interesting, like how if you don't, when you move to the diaspora and you're now struggling, you don't have that same support system that you have home. Is really interesting when Hyacinth said that it's so weird because to imagine people living boxed together and crammed together in like these apartments, but yet you don't know your neighbors. And
Mm-hmm.
home here, you're like 2 yards apart from your neighbor, but their whole biography, right? So it's very, so it's a really interesting thing that she mentioned. So you don't have the kind of communal or familial support system. You don't have the same things, and you go because there's this illusion that American life is better or there's more opportunities. And for some immigrants, that's definitely true, and that's the case. But that's not the case for everybody who goes there, And I'm glad that they explored that. One thing that I found interesting, and I wanted to know your thoughts on, if I could just pose this question, was like they talked about Avril's weight. So when she got there, she gained
Yeah.
weight. And like the way that she wrote about it was almost as though as if it was like this bad thing. Like the weight represented the depression, like it was synonymous with depression. So I wanted to know if like would y'all problematize the way that she wrote about it? I mean, I haven't finished it, so I don't know if that
It
perspective was
doesn't come back up. I
yeah.
don't know.
So
I
what did y'all
noticed the way she wrote about weight because the way she would, Donna. Have you met Donna Sajid,
yeah,
the
yeah,
friend from?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they didn't
Every
know she was
time,
pregnant, yeah.
no, her,
Because
yeah, you didn't know her mom was pregnant,
Yeah.
yeah.
but every time she wrote about Donna's character, because she's bigger, she would mention like, oh, her shirt is stained with ice cream. Oh, she's eating 4 sandwiches and Phaedra doesn't eat anything. It was very like fat phobic and like triggering in my brain, like
Yeah.
because it felt like every time she brought up being fat, it was like connotated with being like a morality problem. Like the bad people, or like if they had a problem, they were bigger for some reason. And I was not a fan of that part. I actually wrote that down because I was like, I was not a fan of the way that sort of stuff. But at the same time, there was like one line where later on where Hyacinth was like, no, it wasn't Hyacinth, it was Phaedra who was like, oh, like her mom would, because Phaedra was bigger when she lived in the US, she would be like, you eat too much or whatever. But then Dion, who was thinner, she'd be like, nobody wants a bone.
Big dog, one
So
bone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
So,
one
like
thing
that
I feel like.
perspective.
Yeah, it's always that double speak because it's like, oh, you're sickly if you're too skinny, you're meager or maga.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my
But
guy.
if you it made me think about the last time I hung out with my mom. She's like, oh, you're gaining weight, and then she moves my chest. I'm like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Don't poke me. So I tweeted that I think yesterday because it made me think about how we get these mixed messages about our body. Like there's never good in between, or there's never a standard that will be okay enough for somebody, because you'll either be too thin or too big.
Because I remember when I was a kid, like it was very accurate, I would say, to like when I was a kid, because I would remember, like, I can't remember how old I was, but I was definitely on the younger side. I was still living down there, and like I was bigger than my mom, but my mom was also like 5'1" and a tiny human, and I was taller than her. And somebody was like, "Oh, you're like bigger than your mom," in like a bad way. And like I remember like being impacted by that as a kid, and yeah, so like I feel like it was accurate, but like me in 2020 is like, please, can we give it a rest? But that book was written in 2015, so
right, but still,
yeah,
still enough to be recent enough to know. But I
Yeah,
think that is the similar thing with the uh there's a part where she talks about, oh, girls, good girls don't do this, right? But then you have to do this to keep your man. So it's like this back and
mm-hmm.
forth of, you need to, you should know, as a woman, we get to all weigh in on you transitioning into a woman, but make sure you're this type of woman, but also keep your man happy. So it's that double speak again.
Mm-hmm. So, Trevor, outside the church, at one point, I wrote the quote. He was like, it's not like in the States where you decide you're going to be who you're going to be, and then you go to school and become that thing. Here on the hill, who you are is who your people have been. And I feel like that was a whole thing with Hyacinth too, because she just like discusses later on. You probably haven't gone to this point, Sajid, but she just talks about like how she tried to escape her fate, but she returned to it. Like she did what her parents did before her, and she wanted to do something else, but it just came full circle.
yeah.
So like, do you guys agree with that? Like, if you were still living on the island, do you think you are like rigidly, these are the
I think
options?
I think it depends on the context in which you're living in, because Bird Hill seems to be a very tight knit, sort of removed, secluded community. The way that it's described,
I
as
was
well,
away from
it's
things.
definitely
Yeah.
not like Bridgetown. It's not like in the
Mm.
center. It's not so. Maybe perhaps for a more rural community where that communal dynamic is something that you need to take part in to survive. Maybe in a context like that, then yeah. But like overall, to say that that is the case for everybody from the islands is not true, because like, I mean, come on, Barbados has like universities, and like, and Trinidad and all these countries, we have we could do what we want. We're not as limited as stereotypes might make it seem. Again, like, there's the perception that there's more opportunities to have in America. And to an extent, that is true, but that's not to say that, we have nothing here and that we can't become anything here. So it could be a product too of the author's own perspective, being a diasporic writer as well. But yeah, I think it's contextual, and it depends on the kind of community that you're from. If you're from a close knit religious community or something like that, if you're from a rural or secluded community, perhaps something like that could be a little bit more true for you, because you mightn't have as much access. You might be more dependent on your community. You might have more duties or responsibilities towards your community. But if you're like, living in the middle of like Port of Spain or Bridgetown or Kingston or something like that, I don't necessarily know that's applicable. I don't think that's across the board applicable to everybody living in the Caribbean at
See,
all.
I think I was thinking about it from the other perspective, in terms of, we don't know anything different than continuing these traditions, so why would we do something different? Does that make sense?
What do you
And
I
mean?
feel
so,
like
when I heard Trevor say that, I was like, oh, well, what else is there? Because this is what my family has always done. So there's nothing
Right,
different for me to do. So that's
right.
how I took it. But that makes sense of what you're saying
Okay,
too,
yeah,
because I mean, I grew up on the countryside of the island, but we had access to go into town, but we were like lower middle class, maybe even poor. And for me, I think I was always thinking that I would have to do something in the hospitality industry, which is very reliant on tourism, because there's no like other industry. I mean, there are other industries now in the Virgin Islands, but they're bought out from big companies that aren't necessarily reinvesting into the island. So I think I was thinking more about like if I was still there, what would I be? I probably would be married. I probably would have a kid. And now being away for so long, I can't imagine my life being that way. I don't want to get married. I don't want to have a kid. You know what I mean? Like, so,
Yeah,
but at
I
that
think
point, I
yeah,
didn't know any different, right? Because that's what I saw happening.
you're definitely right in that sense too. I was thinking about it like career-wise mostly, because that's what popped into mind when he said it. Like because he said, "But you could go to school, learn the thing, and be
Yeah.
that thing." And I was like, "Well, in Trinidad, you could do that too, right? But maybe if you're from a more removed community, or maybe if you're less privileged, you mightn't have the kind of access to do that. So then you might become more tethered to your community in the way that Bird Hill is. Because Bird Hill struck me as more of a rural, sort of secluded, tight knit kind of community. But in terms of like morals, like that is a little bit more applicable. Like I mean, from the perspective of somebody who's away from a Muslim community and stuff, I'm expected to live a certain type of life that I will not live. So that is something that will, you know, rock the boat, I guess, or shake the table or something like that. Some other shaking analogy, right? So,
I will say,
so
like, because I like grew up in Barbados and went to school there, the way the schooling system is, like when you take the like 11 plus, where you figure out like what school you're gonna end up in, it's based like by district. So like where you live impacts what schools you can
yes,
apply for. So like I feel like part of it is self-fulfilling prophecy, because unless you get the grades to go to like a Queen's college like Avril did, or like a Harrison college where I went, like unless you get the grades, you can't really apply for that school unless you're in an area. Yeah. So like I feel like some of it is based on like availability of certain things. So like if you can't go to these schools, then like you're not gonna have access to like certain like A levels that you need to take to go to university. So like I feel like it was like, because it was a rural town and also 1989, it probably was a lot harder even back
that's
then.
true. I forgot that the book. I keep forgetting the book is set
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So
Were
that
You
you
can't
even
really
born yet?
tell.
was that.
No, I wasn't. I was born
Yeah.
5 years later. I want to. Yeah, 5 years later. Wait, no. Yes. I can't do math, so it's amazing that I even went to 8C.
I was born 8 years later, so I'm like.
I was alive.
I keep forgetting because, like, and while I'm reading the book, I'm like, why isn't nobody like picking up their phone
A
and
cell
calling?
phone, or
Yeah.
you
And
know,
I'm like, oh wait, it's 1989.
but still though, the scene where Hyacinth goes to Miss Zora's house. Oh my gosh, that brought back memories because that's God rest her soul, my grandmother. Like she didn't believe in having phones, but like would walk out of her house to go over to the neighbors to take calls. So I was just like, oh,
yeah,
hey, Hyacinth.
that's how it used to be for a lot of people too. But not just in the Caribbean, like even in the States, because my interestingly enough, coincidentally, my mom and my dad and my brother, before I was born, used to live in New York. They lived in New York for a year in 1989. And at the beginning of 1990, my grandfather died, and that's why they moved back home because my mom didn't want to leave my grandmother alone. And that's how my mom got the call. Her neighbor actually got the call, and my mom had to go over. And when I read that scene, it reminded me of my mom because, like, the neighbor called her and said, "There's a phone call. Somebody's on the phone for you. You need to come." So I think that was a very common thing for people back then because even like a house phone wasn't something that everybody had. Especially like my parents, and they were younger, and they had now got like an apartment and stuff like that. So
Which added to Dion's like, what am I supposed to do here, right? Like, at least she could go down to the bodega or the corner store, or you could go out and So even though there weren't things, right, there were still things to do. So I
Yeah,
can't
like reading.
imagine kids now having to be transplanted backward. Might not even have a TV. Could you imagine?
Well, I
read
feel
up.
like it had to be. I feel like a lot of books that we read now, like about the Caribbean, have to be set in the past because, like, the Caribbean is pretty much like caught up in terms of like there's Wi-Fi, there's TVs, like people have cable, like there's so much American culture in the Caribbean now. Like it wouldn't feel as like there's not much juxtaposition. I feel like there's some different things, but it wouldn't be like as much as it is in the book, like Brooklyn versus Barbados.
Yeah.
So they're agreeing with us in the comments.
Yeah. Everybody forgot about the setting. It's like, because the book, it feels sort of like universal, the story, because it doesn't focus on what's missing, minus those little elements of like the phone calls and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
It's really thundering and lightning outside my window.
Oh my gosh. If you disappear, we know the storm took you, and that is the end. Rest your soul.
He was afraid of thunder because we've been having some stuff. We had like just like small thunderstorms recently, and like I think it's his first time like being cognizant of thunder. So like he's so scared of it. He's like, and he's like hiding, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so much fun. And he usually likes to run outside and run away, and we have to like go and catch him. But because of the thunder, he doesn't want to run outside. It's amazing.
The thunder comes in handy. We mentioned like Avril and like what happens to her, that she commits suicide. Like, were you surprised when that happened? Because I let out a gasp.
On how I was just like, oh.
I knew, like, I didn't know how the story was gonna go, because like you could tell that she was suffering from some kind of depression from like the descriptions we got from the kids, but I was not expecting that at all. Yeah, I was expecting her to come to the island or something.
I wasn't expecting it, but I was also expecting her to come to the island, but I wasn't shocked too, because she was in a state where that was a possible thing. And but the moment they say some white American, that she wasn't getting money in the account, and some white American man called, I was like, either she dead or she's like in a high state of depression. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
So when they say that she killed herself, and when they said how she did it, I was like, that's a bit dramatic. But I think, the author kind of wanted to, I mean, this is just my hypothesis, but like that is a very New York kind of suicide, to jump in front of a trigger warnings for anybody who don't want to like talk about that right now, but like that sort of jumping in front of like the train kind of thing is a very New York thing. So I think they kind of wanted to like reify Brooklyn, New York, and that sort of imagery, I guess. And I like the way that the mother said, well, the narrative said that, how the mother couldn't even picture it, because the idea of underground trains is something she couldn't fathom. And I'm remembering, right, this is set in 1989, so it's not like if she could go online and Google the subway to see how it looks or something. So like, she probably doesn't know how the subway looks like, and yet this thing that you can't even fathom is the thing that took your child. And that is what hit me when I read that part.
I actually thought, since she was a nurse, if she would have committed suicide, it would have been from drugs, like an overdose. Yeah. And so I was not expecting the train, because I just wasn't expecting it. I think I put the book down right after that, and I was like, I'm gonna go eat something sugary and come back to this.
Yeah, I feel like it was the fact that she did that was the most shocking for me. Like the train part, like didn't really shock me, because by that point I was like, oh my god, this is happening. Like I feel so bad for the kids. Like I feel bad for Hyacinth that she has to deal with this, and also figure out a way to get the body back to Barbados. Like that whole process, I'm like, I don't want to be old. I don't want to deal with this ever. Like no. But yeah, that whole portion of the book was just like devastating to read about, even though I didn't cry, surprisingly.
Yeah, I didn't cry then. I cried towards then.
But like, what do you think about the mental health rep overall? Like, did you think, because there was a brief mention where Hyacinth was like, yeah, there was one point in like second form where she didn't want to go to school, and I had to like give her, like I had to dress her, I had to make sure she went to the bus stop and got on the bus to go to school. So like, it wasn't something that came out of nowhere. Like
she was predisposed to it. Yeah. It's interesting because it kind of shows that, it's not necessarily that America made her depressed, but America sort of triggered something that might have already been there. And because she was in such a different environment. And then I think too, when she worked with the HIV victim patients, like that could have probably also Yeah, because that's a really tough thing to like
Yeah.
have to see and deal with, especially when you see the humanity in these people during a time where to the rest of the world these were people to be scorned.
Hmm.
So that was really interesting.
I think it made it seem it was the way it was written, it was the progression of it, because there were little things she would go missing, and then she became forgetful, so it was like this slow progression until she just stopped. I think the one thing that I think that could have been fleshed out a little bit more is that sometimes Caribbean people rely on like roots and berries and prayer as a way to like move the person out of um whatever mental health state that they're in. And I think that gap wasn't closed. It was She was dealing with it on her own, and they were just like doing enough to get her through whatever period she was going through when she was home, and then she was in an island on her own in America. So
What did you guys think about like the way the community reacted to like Afro suicide? Because like, did you think it was like accurate to the way like people react currently to like mental health issues in the Caribbean? Like, I can't speak to the more like right now of it, but I can like think to like my childhood, like my teenage years when I was dealing with stuff, and like it's not really spoken about or understood, even though people are dealing with it.
Yeah, I think, well, in my experience, like, I've seen people be very dismissive. So,
mhm.
like, she mad, them mad, he mad, and that's it. Like, I
That
don't think
spirit,
people.
or
But I also do feel, yeah, spirits and that kind of stuff. But in the same breath, I also feel like we're finally getting to a place where people are understanding it a little bit more, where people are actually kind of grappling with what mental health is a little bit more, and
Mm-hmm.
removing some of the stigmas that we have around these sort of different things. I met with a person that I knew recently, and when they talked to me, I could tell that they weren't the person that they used to be before.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that this person also had a very tumultuous history and past. And so my immediate thing wasn't like, well, this person mad, this person gone crazy, or this person have spirit, or they have jinn or something in them. I was just like, wow, what they went through really affected them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I think it's a balance, and it just depends on people's different level. I don't even want to say like level of education, but like it just depends on the person and stuff like that. But I don't necessarily know if the way that they reacted, because suicide is a very strange, like, again, I keep saying like Muslim, like coming from a Muslim community, but like a lot of stuff that I experience here is mediated by that factor. And I've known a few people who died by suicide, and it's like the family will never say, because suicide is a sin, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you'd hear from the moment you hear like three different ways that the person died, you know that it's probably a suicide, because the family is too ashamed to say what actually happened, right? And then there's a lot of guilt around suicide and stuff like that. So unlike Bird Hill, where everybody knew immediately, like in my kind of community, people don't know, or they don't say, or they lie and they say it was something else. Um, and so that's kind of like how people generally react to like a suicide, like in my community, or how I've seen people like in my particular community reacted. But otherwise, I don't know if I could say like what the general reaction to like mental health issues and mental health problems in the Caribbean is. Like, it's definitely not great, because people do still have a long way to go when it comes to understanding mental health in the region. But I also don't want to like stereotype the Caribbean and say that we don't understand mental health at all, because people are people are beginning to learn and beginning to come to terms with things in ways that they haven't before, I guess.
Well, I think Hyacinth tried to really push back, and it could be right because it was her daughter, that she should have a proper burial so her soul could rest, right? And she was like, Pastor, you have these two out of wedlock kids, and you're here passing judgment. So I think there's a little bit of the church gives these kind of loopholes to men. And when women are struggling, then they want to, villainize them in that regard. But I thought it was really interesting to see the community respond to the death. And I think it was mediated because of how much Hyacinth was revered in the community. And because she wasn't, she said it plainly, which I thought was odd. I don't think in my experience, any mother would have said out loud it was suicide.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but she would have had to explain why she didn't go pick up the body too. So it could be a little bit of that. But um, I even think that the author was hinting that Hyacinth also struggled with some, either anxiety or depression, because she was talking about how much pain she has to keep to herself, and that how much pain she sees. So I thought that she, Hyacinth, probably understood Avril's decision to do it because of her also maybe having some insight of how much pain she was bearing at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like things are definitely changing because I've heard friends who still live in Barbados like talking about like therapy and stuff, and I'm like, great, good to hear. Like people are like starting to talk more about it, because it definitely felt like the same thing where everybody would be like, oh, like so sorry about your mom, but never really like broach further into. I feels like that where it's like it's understood and like people know about it, but they're too scared still to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, and it feels like that bridge is slowly being crossed a little bit. This is going to be a question more for Linnell because
Tell
Saja
me.
didn't get to this part, but in as non-spoilery a way as possible, what did you think about Errol's presence in the book? Errol, for people who are watching, is the father to the two kids.
I was like, oh, he showed up. He must not be that terrible. But as soon as the description of him being drunk, high day, I was like, oh, he's a bad man. Um, but I think he reminds me of so many older Caribbean men where they use money to
Yes. Yeah.
get things covered up or access to things, and people continue to give them passes because of that position of power. So I was definitely not expecting him to come back for the girls, but once the carnival started, I was sensing something bad was going to happen, and I didn't know what it was going to be, but it was still horrible. But I didn't expect it not to happen to one of the girls. If the
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know what
I
you
just
know what
like
I'm
what
trying to
you're
say.
talking about.
So yeah, I thought something would have
Yeah, I
directly
also
happened.
thought, yeah.
Yeah,
Same.
yeah, yeah.
Oh no.
So there's
That's
My God.
definitely trigger
I'm not
warning.
gonna go.
There's
I'm preempted.
definitely trigger warnings for that scene. It was very like
it's for
violent.
Sajid, it was this. It's the same level as like Here Comes the Sun, like that kind of like transplant the triggers from one book to the other. That's all you need to.
I think I know exactly where, because, um, yeah,
There's two different versions, so it could be you'll be worried about both of the things happening, and one of them happens and one of them doesn't. So
I'll listen.
yeah.
It's very interesting too, because the novel sort of like sells you on, they go back to the island and the dad tries to reclaim them. But I'm more than halfway through, and I haven't actually gotten to the part where the dad comes back as yet. He's just a figure of the past for now. And I'm reading the book, I'm like, where the father? Because they're saying how he gonna come
Come
back,
back
and I
to
was
that.
like,
Yeah.
here reach. So I just find it interesting that that selling point of the plot hasn't happened in the story as yet. But now I'm very intrigued based on what y'all said. To see
Someone is asking in the comments, Gabrielle is saying, I don't understand. Why did he come back? I think he was going to
Do what he was doing to other people.
the
So
girls.
yes,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
as vague as we can be. Yes, I agree. I think that's why he was back. But it also like I feel like part of the
Yeah.
reason they added that
I think I
character.
know what y'all talking about, because when
Don?
you before you let me in the chat page, I heard a word and I was like,
No,
what? And I'm like,
no.
oh no, oh my goodness, oh fuck, I hate this man already. Oh my god.
He's a horrible. He's
yeah.
horrible. Yeah,
But I
and he
feel like
doesn't get any better.
I feel like his character also, because like we see a lot, like you were mentioning earlier, Linnell, how men are forgiven a lot faster for things than women. Like it showed overall like the more patriarchal part of the society because he was allowed to just come back into their lives, and like vaguely you see that because he's pretty and because of colorism and everything.
Yes. Yeah.
People like put him up on a pedestal even though he's very obviously a horrible person.
Like people know that he's a bad person, but give him a pass.
Exactly. And I feel like there's a line where Dion says like she has like a type, which is like the type like her dad looks like light skin or whatever, like but she looks for flaws in people. Like she finds one thing about them that isn't exactly perfect, and that's what endears her. And I wonder if that was like because of like Errol and because he was so obviously flawed, even though he was like the kind of person people would like lust after.
Yeah, that the whole scene when they went to go pick up the costume.
Vague. You cannot spoil anything.
Oh, sorry.
I'm here to police spoilers.
I love how protective pages and then I was like, spoilers.
Like, getting there. Yeah, I was just like, I could really see that he had like a too tight shirt on and he probably smelled like musty alcohol. And these women are like, oh.
But like it's relatable because you can think of 1,000,001 people who like people fawn over. You're like, I don't get it, but
yeah, I don't get it. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's so okay. Let me see if I have any other questions that are not spoilery. Okay. We can talk about this because this character is briefly mentioned. I feel earlier on. Just do not say anything now about anything else that has. I am watching you. No. We always talk about homophobia and how it plays a large presence in this Caribbean lit specifically, especially when it's set in the past. What did you think about the inclusion of Averill's friend Jean, who we do get to meet at some points in the book?
First of all, I found it interesting that he was known as Bullerman Jean, like they literally like.
That's literally everybody calls. That's like the term. Like I've heard it when I was a kid. Like
yeah, that's the term we use here too. And obviously people say faggots as well. And like it's just a very like it like for those of you who are not from the Caribbean, Bullerman has the same connotation as faggot. Like it's so it's such a trigger.
A derogatory,
Yeah, it's so and the way that it's used so casually in the book to refer to him is just like every time I read it, I'm like, you know, because I've been a victim of being called that word before. So like that word is a very, it yields a lot of power. So like to see it in the book like used so casually, that's not like a critique of the author because it's just sort of authentically representing how the community perceives this man. But yeah, that was terrible to read about how he was kind of an outcast and his mom was an outcast because she was like a whore essentially, or something of the sort, and so like they were like both the outcasts or whatever, and like was it not his niece that was the Trinidadian girl, and she was
I feel it was Trixie, Saran, and Jean.
Jana?
They were
yeah. Trixie's the mom. Saran. Yeah.
Was the Trinidadian.
Yeah, it was interesting. There was a line where Saran had say AA, and I was like, look at Naomi Jackson. She gets in that
waiting for hello. I was waiting for one. You know?
You can't
now, I was like, oh my god, they're turning into an old lady. Hello.
Oh my god. I when I call him my baby nephew when he making like mischief. Hello.
Yeah, But it's a universal hello, like stop, hello. What do you do?
I say that to my dog when my dog does something.
Yeah.
But to get back to your question, I thought Jean served as like a marker for Avril's compassion and want to do the right thing. And then he served as a window for them to learn about their mom because they didn't know her past that much. And I thought it was so endearing when he was just like, oh, you have to wear this. And then Phaedra was
Phaedra.
like, no, I want to do this because I want to be closer to my mom. And he made it happen so he could both honor them in the ways that they wanted to. So I wanted to see more of him because I felt like he was dropped in at really weird times. And then that thing happened to him. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my, we don't know if he's okay.
Sandra left the chat.
I want to say more, but literally it
Something has
happened.
to happen to the one gay person in the book.
Yeah,
Yes.
always has to happen.
Yeah.
Has to happen. I was not expecting it either. I was like, this literally came out of nowhere, but sure, let's go with it. It was very unexpected for me, especially because we're not going to get into it, but I felt it was kind of out of character. But not the person but Jean. I feel like Jean was out of character in that scene. But
So someone said they find that Dion was homophobic while the rest of her family wasn't.
Yes,
Yeah.
She definitely said some shit at certain points. I can't remember where, but like she does. But I feel like because of the shift toward the end, it was seeing like Dion become more like her mother in a way after being on the island for a bit. But I felt it was some of it, especially like the small community element of it and the way they referred to him was very accurate because there was somebody in like my neighborhood where everybody would just refer to them as that. And I'm like, they're human, they have like a job, but that is the one element that everybody
use him for his services, right? Like go to him for certain things, but still treat
it
doesn't make any sense.
They'll still interact with you and be, commune with you when it's convenient and beneficial to you, but like, you're still shunned. But like, I need you to sew this dress for me, but you're still gonna burn in hell, and I still hate you. And I don't want you around my daughter, but I want you to sew her dress for her. Like,
exactly.
It's interesting. Gabrielle said, I've only heard that term, I guess, the BULLER.
Yeah.
I actually thought it was just a Trinidadian thing. So when I was reading the book, I was like, oh, maybe it's more regional. But now that you say that, I'm like, okay, it's just
it was because it's the main thing, like how in like Jamaicans have a different word, which is very similar in like the idea behind the slur. It's like the idea behind the slur, but like even like family members would say it, and I'm just like, reading that entire section, I was like very much reminded of like growing up and being so angry and not understanding like why people were the way that they were, especially when they weren't religious in any form.
I think that's the weird part too, right? Like you'll have these people who aren't religious, but then spit such hatred towards people like this doesn't make any sense. And it brought me back to there was a big well, I don't know if it was big because the island is small, but there was a small community of gay men who did drag where I'm from. And I remember it used to be like this huge secret, but everybody knew it was happening, right? And so people would go to the show, but you had to do it in secret because it's like, well, why are you there? Or who were you there with kind of thing. And it's just like, I never understood why there was this divide. And to this day, I have family members. My uncles are the most misogynistic, homophobic. I can't even sometimes understand how we're cut from the same cloth because I'm like, why are you so hateful? And why are you always calling somebody fat when you are who you are, sir? So anyway, I just went off on a tangent.
It wouldn't be a Bashment Live if we didn't go off on tangents, let's be real.
I love my uncles. They still need to grow. I just want to say that on the record.
But yeah, I will say like there's still a lot of like toxic masculinity that needs to be dealt with. Even like just like smaller things that people say sometimes that I'm like, I don't know if you realize like what you're saying because it's so like accepted here. But like at the same time, I wonder like how would I be if I still lived in the Caribbean, if I didn't move and was like given the opportunity to grow more as a human, because I used to be a little shit too.
Yeah.
Once upon a time.
I guess we kind of have that, like, because sometimes to like, you know, you kind of live in a bubble when you get involved in more progressive spaces, like how
Mm-hmm.
I'm in university and I'm in a gender studies department. So it's like I'm like literally deconstructing race and gender and all these different things. And then it's like I come and like, you know, you're around your friends and your colleagues and everybody's so like-minded and everybody's progressive and you have all these
Mm-hmm.
discussions. And then you come home and then that bubble is popped and it's like you're back at the start. It's like, how do you even like begin to deconstruct something with somebody?
Yeah,
who you
exactly.
love and respect, but you want to punch in the face at the same time. It's so odd because the first time I saw the tweets about the street harassment, I was like, wow, I would have never imagined anybody doing that in the Caribbean. But I'm also far removed, right? Like I go home
Mhm.
every like 4 years, 5 years, so like I'm not as plugged in.
Oh yeah, I like when I was 13, people used to follow, like men used to follow me when I was walking to the bus stop through town. Like it's a problem, and it's
That
always been.
that's for walking to go to the cemetery at night and the
Yeah, and the man grabs her
grab it. I
100%.
was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
that seems like just another day walking to the store.
Hmm. Yeah. I have one more question written down. So if you, but it's like about the end of the book. So if anybody else has anything they want to talk about about Starside, now is the time.
Oh,
Hello, I
someone
think
is.
I got disconnected. Okay. Y'all were talking about
Yeah,
like harassment or something.
Mm.
yeah, we were
Yeah.
saying how like the harassment that Phaedra experiences when they were like out at night, like Dion and her early
Right,
on,
yeah.
was like pretty
At the
accurate.
beginning of the book, yeah. I mean, so like when that happened, I wasn't surprised because as Linnell, you were talking about the tweets, and that I was retweeting. So, Cat Cause of You is something that I was a co-founder of with some people in on campus in my department. So it's a project from my department, but it's like an extracurricular activity that we do. And it's like Cat Calls of NYC, but we go around the UE campus in St. Augustine, Trinidad, and we chalk the messages and do the same things. And like, I mean, I'm not a woman, so I've never experienced harassment and catcalling. I know it happens, but when we started getting these stories, y'all, the
Mhm.
kind of stories that happen on the university campus, which is supposed to be an educated space with grown educated people, far more for the stories that happen in the country in general. Like, it's just so shocking, to the point where I've kind of realized that, you know, these men on the street are capable of anything, and they, you know, women have gone through everything, they've experienced everything. So when that happened in the book, at that point I'd become so desensitized to it. I wasn't even shocked when a old man grabbed,
Mm-hmm.
as soon as she said a male voice, I'm like, she's going to get some kind of harassment or some kind of assault, because it's so common.
It was more than harassment. I feel like that was assault because he grabbed
Yeah,
her,
it
right?
was assault, right? And even how the way that she described his, she still felt his sweat
Yes,
lingering
but
on his
on his. Oh, yeah,
ugh.
yeah.
Yeah, and like that's why I think, you know, you could speak to some of the testament of Jackson's writing. I know in the beginning I critiqued her writing a little bit, but she does have some lines that really do punch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that the
So
guy
yeah,
from who was like the church keeper who did that?
I don't remember who. Like it was a character that we definitely met before, but
Right, right.
I have
Anyway,
a question. I mean, maybe this was revealed later on in the book, but like, when Donna's mother was having the child, right? She said that the man in the balcony reminded her of the priest.
hmm
Okay, all right,
yeah,
yeah, right, okay, yeah,
yeah. But I feel
okay,
like that also like spoke to like the sometimes like double standards in the Caribbean where like men like
hmm
feel like they have more access to women's bodies than sometimes like they feel like they have a right to impose themselves on women's bodies in a way, because I feel like that was always my constant struggle of being like, no, I'm not gonna learn to cook and clean for you, like levels of like arguments I would have with like the men like I grew up around. And
Didn't
just like the
Dion?
way.
Oh,
Mhm.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like just the way like even like when I was a kid and I'd be out at night, I remember getting chased by men like when I was with my other friend. Like it happened, and like I forget about these things because it was like such a non-issue in my brain. Like I grew up and whatever, like nothing bad happened, thank God. But yeah, stuff
yeah.
happened when.
It's so common in the Caribbean, like harassment
Mhm.
and assault, and It is so incredibly common in the Caribbean, and I knew that, but I didn't learn it until we did this Cat Calls of UE project. And I think those tweets that I was retweeting the other day just further amplified that. These girls saying like I've started experiencing this since I was 11 and 12 years old, and like it was just a
Can't
really
wear that because so
The
and
men,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. I actually had an experience where so in the Caribbean we'd wear uniforms even if it's not private school. So all schools wear uniforms, and we have dress down days where we get to dress up in non-uniform. So those would be like really special days for everybody. And one day we had dress down day, and our principal made teachers walk around school and pick out girls who were dressed inappropriately. Mind you, they weren't dressed inappropriately. It would be like slightly tight skirts, or maybe the skirt slightly above the knee, or something like that. And like the things that he told them about how, if you're putting yourself at risk and you're not in your school uniform, and the school will be held responsible for that. And I'm like, it's just
I remember
ridiculous.
a time right after gym, because we still had to wear uniforms for gym or physical ed,
Yeah.
and I remember sitting on the basketball court trying to cool down, and my classmate came up to me. He's like, "You going to get raped? How you sitting down?" And
Love
to
that.
this, yeah. And so it was just like everything you do, right?
I remember there used to be like, I'm surprised it wasn't mentioned in the book because I feel like it would have fit in. But like the conductors on the bus like used to hit on me and also hit on my mom. We were like 24 years apart. I was a kid, but like it feels like that was the thing they did with like Dion and stuff too. Like we never knew the ages of the men she was flirting with, ever.
I always inferred that they were older though.
Oh yeah, like the men that they met at the church picnic.
Yeah.
Has his own apartment. Sis, how old is he? Like I was very concerned, and then Hyacinth went up and like beat her and told her to come.
Her versus, or she slapped her, right? Versus,
and
the men. So, and but there was an opening scene where Dion said, "Sex is to be used to be bartered. You don't just give it away." So I think she even was, tuned into, I have to, even if I don't like it, right? I need to know how to use my body to get what I want when I need to.
But do you think like Hyacinth, because she was very much like, you have to wear this kind of clothing, you can't act this way, like did you think it was justified in what she was trying to protect the kids, or do you think it was more like a religious element?
I think it was both. I think it was a little bit of both, because I think she knew how the women that she was, delivering these babies for, who were outcasts, how that impacts them being a part of the community, being loved and all of that. But same thing, like, don't tarnish my reputation, or is it Bratwick, the family name too? Like, you have to conduct yourself a certain way. So I think it is a little bit of both.
Is there anything else you guys want to discuss before I ask my final question, which Sajid will not be able to answer?
I love how all of us never read the book until the last minute.
Listen, we need the book to be fresh on our mind.
Book, so I'm happy about that.
Wow. Okay, so you prepare for the next book. We just already want to have you back. As big as you can be, Linnell, we have very different thoughts about the ending of this book. I found it unsatisfying. You liked it. As big as you can be.
I'm going to mute y'all, and I'm going to let you all have this discussion.
Yeah, okay, I'll like clap when we're done so that you can.
So I'm going to mute now. So, yeah.
Okay, go.
Okay. So I thought it was satisfying in the sense of, from the part of Dion feeling like, okay, now I'm not leaving. I need to make this work, and I have a family, the thing that I've always wanted. So I think for me, if Dion was still mad about being on the island, I think I would have been like, oh, wasn't satisfying. But I loved that it was like, okay, I'm going to make this work. let me go cook and clean with Hyacinth. But I think what sent me over the edge was when Hyacinth apologized for not coming for them sooner. And I was
Okay,
like,
yeah.
anything
Oh, okay.
after that, I was like, ah! Oh my gosh. So I think for me, that's what put me over the edge because you never see older Caribbean
Mm.
people apologize for either not showing up or causing harm. And so for me, that part was like, oh, this is so good.
Yeah, like I feel like, okay, I get what you mean. Like the relationship elements of everything were tied up well. I mean the literal ending of the book where they are in the church and it's Old Year's Night, which like I love seeing that it was called Old Year's because that is the right way to call it. And like the story about like the woman who stole children. Like I get it's a whole moral tale about being like, oh, you have to do things for yourself, but it felt really fucking weird. I was like, that was the end of the book, a story.
How they brought back like the great grandmother breaking her hand and
all of that.
Like, where did this come from?
All
like,
of that confused me. I was like,
what is this? But I think it was supposed to close the loop
book.
of the generational like potential generational curse, maybe.
Okay, yeah.
Of carrying pain silently, maybe.
I felt like the two stories back to back in like the both sections was really weird to me. I was like,
what is this?
Yeah, exactly. But like this, like you said, like the story of like the family was tied up well. It was just like the actual ending itself. I was like, okay, this is where it ended.
Yeah, I did feel like at certain points some stories, like additional stories were like, or lessons were dropped in. I was like, we didn't need this here. Like, what is this? But yeah, for me, anything after Hyacinth apologizing, I blanked out. I don't remember.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes.
I was Instagram.
Oh, that was so
to
funny.
me, this was one of the best picks.
Yeah.
For 2020.
I can't remember any of the other books we read. It's been a whole cesspit of like, what is anything?
We did With the Fire
on. Oh, Dear Hayden's Off.
Yeah.
Brother. Ooh.
Oh, no, Brother was the best.
I did really enjoy this one though. I did. It was up with like Here Comes the Sun and vibes for me.
Oh, see, I feel like this was better than Here Comes the Sun. But I still enjoyed it, you know. Did we read Queen of the Conquered?
No, you read that by yourself.
Yeah.
You told us about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We read Hurricane Child. That's what it was.
That was last year.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Sajid really wants to announce our next book, so I'm going to let them announce it.
Oh. Okay.
And, my copy's over there. I'm not getting it.
It's
yes. Oh, I do have my copy. Hey.
My copy. Mine's is like shiny.
Yeah, I don't know. This is like a 99 version.
So we'll be reading.
This is what we're reading.
The live show will be at the end of October, right?
Yes, it can be.
Yeah.
It totally can be.
It's on the promotional thing that you made. Yes, it's October 25th.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna put that in my calendar because y'all are hearing this. My brain is like a sieve. I need to write down these things.
So I already read the book. And all I will say is that this is like Here Comes the Sun level trauma.
Oh, okay. So read some rom-coms the week before is what you're telling me.
Some rom-coms before and after because it's heavy. It was a very, very heavy, And
okay, so we have to get a romance in here somewhere because
I think Jareen had recommended some romance author to us previously.
Yes.
I did not write it down though, and I was like, "Oh, I'll go back to the
We can always ask them. I think I could probably ask Jareen or Cindy or one of them. They probably know at least one romance or lighthearted book because I feel like we just keep reading. And have
trauma lit, yeah.
I feel like I'm not responsible for this.
Cindy recommended a police detective that I want to say happens in. Do you know what I'm
Grenada.
talking? I just where?
So there's a book called The Bone Readers by Jacob
Yes,
Ross. Yes,
that's
that it's set
exactly it.
on a fictional Caribbean island, but Jacob Ross
Oh
himself
yes.
is from Grenada.
Yes,
And yeah, so maybe we could do that.
yes,
Mhm.
I already
I don't
got
Yeah.
know
it.
what we
So
decide.
yes, yes,
I mean,
Y'all will
it's still like
discover.
murder. It's still like a murder mystery. So, but I guess it
yeah.
wouldn't be like as
But you're
trauma.
expecting. Well, you don't necessarily have to have the traumatic part on page. That's why I think murder mystery is a little bit like, you kind of go in knowing that somebody's dead, and then
Yeah,
you might learn how they were killed, but you don't always. It's about who did it.
yeah.
I feel like for next April Fools, we need to read. Remember that book I sent y'all a while back, the cover, like Murder in the Caribbean or whatever. I feel like we need to do that. I feel like that needs to happen at some point. I think that would be
Oh my
great.
gosh.
That could be like our April read
think
next
I
year.
got a book, Something Matters. It was on NetGalley, and it was supposed to be another detective story. Bodies were showing up on St. Croix, which I was like, St. Croix don't need no kind of story like this, okay? But I didn't finish reading it, and so that's why my NetGalley ratio is so low. Mhm.
Can't relate. Well, thank you guys for joining us for
Yeah.
this month's Bashment Book Club. I think we got through it.
Oh, and I have music this
Oh,
time.
right. I didn't add anything to the playlist. I thought about it, but then I was
Well,
reading the book.
now we know exactly who to sing. We could sing Adele because she's now
Oh,
a
Don't
no, we are
even.
not.
Jamaican.
No, we are not.
That isn't. We need to discuss this, Adele. I was
We
shook
should
when I saw. I was like, "Who is this?" Oh, here's singing dance
I don't
hall.
know, what
Like,
do my girls call it? Mini buns or something. They call it mini buns instead
oh
of
my
buns.
God. Yes, that whole photo confused me. I was like, "Where has this been?"
You know what?
Like,
You know what confuzzled me the most is like, okay, cultural appropriation is one thing, but you could have at least put a more flattering picture.
what were those tights? Was my like, if you're gonna do it good. Like, let flex on me. Like, I was so annoyed by that entire photo.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. And then she has a bantu knot. I'm like, oh,
I
They're
will
mini
say the
buns.
tweets that have come out. Yeah, they're mini bands. They're not bantu knots.
Mini buns.
oh.
The tweets that have come out of that photo are fantastic. I've just been scrolling through. I just searched Adele and started scrolling, and it's just so good. So fast.
Somebody says she gonna put out a reggae album before Rihanna.
Before Rihanna. I mean, probably at this point, let's be real. Do you see there's this girl that looks like Rihanna on TikTok or something? And Rihanna commented underneath this girl's like photo on Insta. She was like, "When the album coming?" Let's shame. She feels none of it. I was
I think
done.
someone said that we would get a Adele reggae album faster than
Let
Rihanna.
me tell you,
Oh, yeah,
Miss
she
Robin Fenty is one day, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, going to drop an album just so
Just so.
promotion, and everybody is going to just freak out.
I don't think we're ever
Me
gonna get
included.
an album.
I feel like she has something in the works, and she's
No.
spitefully holding it out because she's like, people need to stop
Might
asking
get
me
a
for
single, but not a whole album.
whatever she got. She would give it to me already.
She gonna wait till everybody get fed up and was like, okay, we could just buy the makeup and listen to Shut Up and Drive or something.
Oh my god, Shut Up and Drive. Iconic
And
era.
somebody said she's gonna come up with a furniture line.
Listen,
And then all home goods before. I was like, I would love a new love seat.
I would love a Rihanna bookshelf. That would be amazing.
right?
Oh my gosh, I almost bought the book. I put it in my cart, and like sometimes,
Wait, the $200 book. That's what we discussed, sis.
let me tell you, I misread
book?
it. I thought it was
Rihanna has a $200 book.
Yeah, I misread the numbers. I was like, delete.
What you have in the book for it to be $200?
It's a photography book, so it's very expensive to publish.
Oh,
Like, I
okay.
understand the price, but like 200, even me, I have a limit. $200 is it.
Oh my gosh.
Nah.
I wouldn't spend more than like $30-something on a book, US.
$2.
Okay, what song are we going
Put
out
it on
to?
shuffle and press play. Whatever comes. If I
I'm
don't know
gonna
it, I don't know it.
I probably don't know because I know like
What is right?
10% of all songs from the region. I've been told by my friends I'm a white woman on the inside because of my music taste.
Don't kill me, please.
Listen, I've listened to Taylor Swift and Katy Perry's and
We
Lady
need to
Gaga.
have a discussion after about Taylor Swift because I feel you have some hot takes that we need to discuss.
I listen. Taylor she makes points, okay? She like her songs make points, okay? Like especially the older ones. You see when she had curly hair, like she was making points, okay? And I'm relating to like all of this shit.
Oh,
Y'all
I'm
are
sorry.
not judging me, okay?
I'm judging you. I just want to hear your opinion. Let me play a song and then we could go off and discuss this.
Listen to Enchanted, okay? It's beautiful.
Plays Enchanted. Okay, we all know this one. Okay. Sajid. Sajid, come on.
Sounds familiar.
Linnell's like living her best life.
Vaguely familiar.
I think we're losing people.
Yeah, because they think we're crazy. Anyway, thank you for coming. That was our end. Sajid didn't sing along because we had to have a discussion about the songs he knows.
My hair is
I have
falling.
to move to like Kansas or Pennsylvania at this point.
Anyway, bye guys. Thank you for coming and listening to our chaos at this end.